He held a valid first-class ticket in his hand, wearing a $3,000 suit, but to the gate agent, he was just a problem that needed to be removed. She sneered, called security, and humiliated him in front of 200 people, convinced she held all the power. She thought she was protecting the airline's image. She had no idea that the older man in the scuffed leather jacket standing right behind her, the one she also insulted, wasn't just a passenger. He was the man who owned the very plane she was standing on. What happens when arrogance meets the ultimate authority you're about to find out. This is the story of how one gate agent destroyed her career in seconds, and the brutal karma that followed. The air inside Terminal 4 at JFK International Airport was thick with the specific kind of tension that only exists during the holiday rush. It was a cacophony of rolling suitcases, crying toddlers, and the incessant, drone-like announcements over the PA system. Outside, the December snow was whipping against the glass, threatening delays, but inside, the ecosystem was purely driven by stress and hierarchy. At Gate B12, the flight to London Heathrow was prepping for boarding. This was the flagship route for Sterling Airways, the crown jewel of transatlantic aviation. Standing behind the podium was Brenda Miller. Brenda had worked for Sterling Airways for 15 years, and in that time, she had calcified. She wasn't just a gate agent. In her mind, she was the gatekeeper. She wore her navy blue uniform like armor, the gold wings pinned slightly crooked on her lapel. Her hair was pulled back into a tight, severe bun that seemed to pull the skin of her face taut. Giving her a permanent expression of skepticism, Brenda hated three things: delays, luggage that was 1 inch too large, and people who she felt didn't belong. She tapped her long, manicured fingernails against the counter, watching the passengers amass. She categorized them instantly. The tired parents, Group 4. The backpackers, Group 5. The businessmen, Group 1. And then she saw him. Doctor. Elias Freeman stepped off the moving walkway and adjusted the lapels of his charcoal wool coat. Elias was a man of immense presence, standing 6'2", with dark skin that seemed to glow under the harsh fluorescent lights. He moved with a quiet, fluid grace. He was carrying a sleek, leather weekender bag, vintage, Italian, and clearly expensive. Elias was tired. He had just come off a 30-hour shift at Mount Sinai Hospital, where he was the chief of neurotrauma. He had saved 2 lives the previous night and lost 1. All he wanted was a glass of champagne, the lie-flat seat he had paid $6,000 for, and sleep. He approached the priority lane, his movements slow and deliberate. Brenda's eyes narrowed. The boarding sign hadn't even lit up yet, but the first-class lane was open for pre-checks. She watched Elias approach. In her mind, the calculation was instant and prejudiced. Young, black, expensive bag. No entourage. To Brenda, this didn't read chief surgeon. It read rapper, athlete, or fraud. And Brenda hated the idea of new money in her cabin. "Excuse me." Brenda's voice cut through the ambient noise like a serrated knife. She didn't look up from her screen, but she held up a hand, palm out, stopping Elias 5 feet from the desk. Elias paused, blinking. He offered a polite, tired smile. "Good evening." "Back of the line." "Sir," Brenda said, finally looking up. Her eyes were cold, scanning him up and down. "We are only processing first class and Diamond Medallion members right now. General boarding is in 40 minutes. Please wait by the food court." Elias didn't flinch. He was used to this. He had been black in America his whole life. He had been black in high-end retail stores, in country clubs, and in hospitals where patients asked for a real doctor before seeing his credentials. He maintained his calm. "I am aware," Elias said, his voice a deep baritone, smooth and educated. He stepped forward and placed his boarding pass and passport on the high counter. "I'm in seat 1A. Brenda stared at the boarding pass. 1A, the most coveted seat on the plane, the bulkhead suite. She didn't pick it up. Instead, she let out a sharp, incredulous huff of air. She typed something furiously into her keyboard, her eyes darting between the screen and Elias. "Name," she demanded, ignoring the document right in front of her face. "Dr. Elias Freeman," he said softly. "Dr. Freeman," she repeated, dragging out the title with a note of mockery. "Right. Well, Doctor, the system is flagging this reservation." "Flagging it?" Elias frowned. "I checked in online 2 hours ago. I have the digital pass on my phone as well." "Digital passes can be faked," Brenda snapped. She finally picked up his passport, flipping through it aggressively. She bent the spine back, examining the photo page as if looking for a seam in the lamination. "And the credit card used for the purchase, do you have it?" Elias sighed, shifting his weight. A few people in the group one line behind him were starting to watch. "I do. But I'm not sure why that's necessary. The payment cleared weeks ago." "Security check." Brenda lied. She knew it was a lie. There was no flag on the screen. The screen showed green, cleared. But Brenda had a gut feeling, and her gut was usually filled with bile. She wanted to rattle him. She wanted him to get angry. If he got angry, she could call the police. If she called the police, he wouldn't fly. Elias reached into his coat and produced a heavy, black metal card, the Centurion card. He placed it gently on the counter. The sight of the card irritated Brenda even more. "Stand to the side," she ordered, tossing his passport back onto the counter, dangerously close to the edge. "I need to verify this with the supervisor. You're blocking the flow. There is no one behind me. Ma'am," Elias pointed out. The line was empty. The other first-class passengers were still in the lounge. "I said, stand to the side." Brenda raised her voice, causing heads to turn in the nearby waiting area. "Do not make me ask you again, or I will mark you as a disruptive passenger, and you won't be going to London at all. Do you understand?" Elias stared at her. His hands curled into fists at his sides, then relaxed. He was a surgeon. He knew that reacting to chaos only bred more chaos. He took a deep breath, picked up his documents, and stepped 2 feet to the left, leaning against the glass wall. "Thank you," Brenda hissed. She turned her attention to the empty lane, pretending to be busy, typing nothing. She had him in the penalty box. She felt a surge of adrenaline. This was her gate, her rules. 10 minutes passed. Elias stood by the window, watching the ground crew load luggage into the belly of the Boeing 777. He checked his watch. Boarding was supposed to start in 5 minutes. He looked back at Brenda. She was laughing with a co-worker, a younger man named Todd, who looked uncomfortable. She pointed at Elias, whispered something, and laughed again. Elias felt the heat rising in his neck. It wasn't just the inconvenience, it was the performance of power. He approached the counter again. "Ma'am," Elias said firmly. "It has been 10 minutes. You haven't called a supervisor. Boarding is about to begin." Brenda's smile vanished instantly. She swiveled her head toward him. "Sir, you are hovering. That is a security risk. I am a passenger," Elias said, his voice hardening. I have a patient in London waiting for a consultation tomorrow morning. I need to know if I am flying. You will fly when I say you fly, Brenda shouted. The terminal went quiet. Just then, an older man shuffled up to the counter. He looked rough. He was wearing a faded, brown leather bomber jacket that had seen better decades, a pair of nondescript jeans, and a Boston Red Sox cap pulled low over his eyes. He was carrying a duffel bag that looked like it held gym clothes. He looked like a grandfather who had gotten lost on his way to a fishing trip. He stepped up next to Elias. "Excuse me, miss," the older man said. His voice was gravelly, sounding like a man who smoked too many cigars. "I think there's a mistake with my seat assignment. I'm supposed to be in 2B, but the app says I've been bumped." Brenda looked from the elegant black doctor to the scruffy white man. "2 headaches. 1 moment. Can't you see I'm dealing with a security threat?" Brenda snapped at the old man, gesturing vaguely at Elias. "He doesn't look like a threat," the old man said, looking Elias up and down. He offered Elias a small, tired wink. "He looks like a guy trying to get to London. Just like me." "I didn't ask for your opinion, sir," Brenda sneered. She looked at the old man's boarding pass on the counter. "Preston, just a last name. Look, Mr. Preston, you're flying standby on an employee pass. You know the rules. Paying customers come first. We're overbooked. You're bumped." The old man, Preston, leaned on the counter. "Actually, I checked the load factor. The flight is only 90% full. There are 3 empty seats in business. You can slide me in there." Brenda's face turned a shade of violent red. She hated non-revs airline employees or their families flying for free. They were bottom feeders in her eyes. And this one, looking like a hobo, trying to tell her how to do her job. "Listen to me, you old relic," Brenda said, her voice dripping with venom. "I don't care what you think you saw on the computer. I am the gate agent. I decide who gets on. You are deadheading on a buddy pass. You have 0 rights. Now take your bag and get out of my line before I ban you from the airline permanently." The old man didn't move. He stood his ground, a strange, amused glint in his blue eyes. "You'd ban me? That's a bold move. Brenda." He read her name tag. "That's Ms. Miller to you." She spat. She turned back to Elias, deciding she had enough of this 2-front war. She needed a victory. "And you?" She pointed a long, acrylic fingernail at Elias's chest. "I've just decided. Your attitude is aggressive. I don't feel safe with you on this flight. I'm denying you boarding." The crowd gasped. A woman in the queue behind them spoke up. "Hey, he hasn't done anything. He's just standing there." "Quiet," Brenda yelled at the passengers. She picked up the phone on the desk. "I'm calling airport police. We have 2 disruptive passengers at gate B12. 1 refusing to leave the secure area. 1 aggressive male." Elias looked at Brenda, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You cannot be serious. I am a chief surgeon. I have a valid ticket." "You had a valid ticket," Brenda corrected, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. She typed 4 keystrokes. Clack, clack, clack. "Enter." "Now, you have a refund processing. It should hit your account in 7 to 10 business days. Goodbye." Elias felt a cold pit in his stomach. It wasn't the money. It was the injustice. It was the fact that she could erase his plans, his commitment to his patient, simply because she didn't like his face. He looked at the old man. "Preston." "Can you believe this?" Elias whispered. Preston adjusted his Red Sox cap. His expression had shifted. The amusement was gone. In its place was a look of cold, hard iron. "Oh, I believe it," Preston rumbled. "I see it. But she made one mistake." "What's that?" Elias asked. Preston turned his head toward the jet bridge door where the captain of the flight had just emerged to check on the delay. "She forgot to check who she was talking to," Preston said. Preston reached into his worn leather jacket. Brenda saw the movement. "He's got a weapon!" Brenda shrieked, dropping the phone. "Security. He's reaching for something." Panic rippled through the gate area. People scrambled back. 2 TSA agents who had been walking by sprinted toward the desk. Preston didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a badge, but it wasn't a police badge. It was an ID card, a solid black ID card with gold lettering and a holographic chip. He slammed it onto the counter with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. "Brenda Miller," Preston said, his voice projecting clearly, silencing the hysteria. "Look at the card." Brenda, trembling, looked down. The name on the card didn't say Preston. It said Richard Preston Sterling, title founder and CEO, Sterling Airways. The color drained from Brenda's face so fast it looked like her soul had left her body. Richard Sterling took off his Red Sox cap, revealing a shock of silver hair that was recognizable from every airline magazine in the seat pockets of the plane behind her. "I am not a relic," Richard said, his voice low and dangerous. "And this man is not a threat. But you are a liability." The silence at gate B12 was heavier than the snow piling up on the tarmac outside. For 3 seconds, the world seemed to stop spinning. The hum of the terminal faded into the background, leaving only the sound of Brenda's ragged breathing and the imposing presence of Richard Sterling. Brenda stared at the ID card. The holographic chip caught the overhead light, gleaming like a judgmental eye. Richard Preston Sterling. Her brain tried to reject the information. It was impossible. Richard Sterling was a billionaire. He was a myth. He was the man who appeared on CNBC in tailored Italian suits, discussing global mergers and fuel hedging strategies. He wasn't this man in a stained leather jacket and scuffed work boots standing in line for a standby ticket. Brenda's voice cracked. She cleared her throat. But the arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, high-pitched squeak. "Mr. Sterling, I didn't recognize you. The hat. The clothes." "That's the point, isn't it?" Richard said. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. His voice was calm, leveled, and terrifyingly authoritative. He leaned closer, resting his elbows on the high counter, invading her sanctuary. "I dress like a gardener, and you treat me like garbage, Doctor. Freeman dresses like a king, and you treat him like a criminal." "So, Brenda, I have to ask, who exactly do you treat with respect? Only the people you think you can't bully?" "Sir, please," Brenda stammered, her hands shaking as she reached for the mouse, instinctively trying to close the screens she had been manipulating. We have strict security protocols. I was trying to protect the flight. You can't be too careful these days." "Don't touch the computer," Richard commanded. It was a whip crack of a voice. Brenda froze. "Step away from the podium," Richard said. "Now!" Before Brenda could move, the double doors of the jet bridge swung open again. Captain James Anderson, a 30-year veteran pilot with silver bars on his shoulders, stepped out, looking annoyed. "Brenda, what is the hold-up?" Captain Anderson barked. "We're burning APU fuel, and we haven't scanned a single ticket. We miss our slot, and we're stuck here for 2 hours." Then, the captain saw the man in the leather jacket. Captain Anderson stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes widened. He immediately straightened his posture, tucking his hat under his arm. "Mr. Sterling," the captain said, his tone shifting instantly to one of immense respect. "I didn't know you were joining us on this leg. We weren't notified by HQ." "HQ doesn't know, James," Richard said, acknowledging the pilot with a nod. "I like to do spot checks on my customer experience. I call it mystery shopping. And let me tell you, James, the experience today has been illuminating." Richard gestured to the 2 Port Authority police officers who were jogging toward the gate, hands resting near their holsters. They were responding to Brenda's panic call about her weapon. "Is there a problem here?" The lead officer, a burly man named Sergeant Miller, asked, scanning the scene. "We got a call about a weapon and an aggressive subject." Brenda looked like she wanted to melt into the floor carpet. She opened her mouth to speak, to spin a story, but Richard cut her off. "I am the aggressive subject," Richard said calmly, turning to the police. "And this is the weapon." He held up his company ID again. Sergeant Miller looked at the ID, then at the terrified gate agent, and finally at the calm, elegant black doctor standing to the side. The officer lowered his hand from his belt. He recognized Richard Sterling immediately. The man's face was on a billboard entering the airport. "Mr. Sterling," the officer said, confused. "She called it in on you." "She did," Richard said. "She accused me of having a weapon because I questioned why she was racially profiling a paying first-class passenger and denying him boarding for no reason." Richard turned back to Brenda. She was cornered. The captain was staring at her with disappointment. The police were looking at her with annoyance for the false alarm. And Dr. Freeman was watching her with a stoic, silent gaze that hurt worse than screaming. "Brenda," Richard said softly, "you called the police on your own CEO. You lied about flight capacity. You lied about a security flag on Dr. Freeman's ticket. And you publicly humiliated a man who has likely saved more lives in a week than you have helped in your entire career." I thought the ticket was fraudulent," Brenda cried out, tears starting to well up. They were tears of self-pity, not remorse. "He has a generated boarding pass. It looked suspicious I was just doing my job." "Let's see," Richard said. He walked around the counter. Brenda gasped. "You can't come back here. It's a secure zone." "I own the zone." "Brenda," Richard said. He pushed past her, the smell of old leather and expensive cologne washing over her. He stood at her terminal. He knew the system better than she did. He had helped design the interface 10 years ago. His fingers flew across the keyboard. "Let's look at the logs," Richard narrated for the crowd, which had now pressed in closer. Phones held high, recording every second. "Here is Dr. Freeman's reservation. Booked 3 weeks ago. Full fare. First class. Status confirmed. No flags. No notes." He hit another key. "And here is the timestamp from 10 minutes ago. Manual override initiated by Agent B. Miller. Reason code entered other." Richard turned his head slowly to look at her. "You didn't even have a code for it. You just hit other and cancelled a $6,000 ticket because you didn't like the way he looked." Brenda choked. "And here," Richard continued, "is the standby list. You told me the flight was full. The system shows 4 open seats in business class and 2 in first. You lied to me, directly to my face." Richard stepped back from the computer. The terminal screen glowed behind him, displaying the undeniable evidence of her prejudice and deceit. "Doctor." "Freeman," Richard said, turning to the surgeon. "Please, step forward." Elias moved toward the podium. He stood tall, despite the exhaustion dragging at his bones. "I want to apologize," Richard said, his voice echoing in the quiet gate area. "On behalf of Sterling Airways, on behalf of the 40,000 employees who actually do their jobs with integrity, I apologize. This is not who we are, and this is not how we treat our guests." "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," Elias said, his voice steady. "But the apology isn't what matters to me right now." "I know," Richard said. "Restitution matters, and justice matters." Richard turned back to Brenda. She was trembling so hard her name tag was vibrating. "Brenda," Richard said, "give me your badge." The request hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Give me your badge. It wasn't just a piece of plastic. It was her identity, for 15 years. Brenda had wielded that badge like a shield and a sword. It gave her access to the lounge. It gave her discounts. It gave her the power to ruin vacations and demand respect she hadn't earned. "Mr. Sterling, please," Brenda pleaded, clutching the lanyard around her neck. "I've been with the company for 15 years. I have a pension. I have perfect attendance. You can't do this over one misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Richard laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You called the police on a black man because he had a nice bag. You called the police on an old man because he questioned you. That's not a misunderstanding. Brenda, that is a character defect. And unfortunately for you, toxicity is contagious." He held out his hand, palm open, waiting. "I won't," Brenda whispered. She looked at Todd, her co-worker. "Todd, tell him about the memo last week, about the fraud alert for stolen credit cards." Todd, who had been shrinking into the corner, trying to become invisible, looked at Brenda, then at the CEO. He swallowed hard. "The memo," Todd said, his voice cracking, "said to check ID matches on international credit cards. It didn't say to decline valid tickets. Brenda and Doctor, Freeman offered you his physical card. You refused to look at it. Traitor," Brenda hissed at him. "Give me the badge." "Brenda," Richard repeated, "or I will have Sergeant Miller remove it for you. And if he has to do it, you won't be leaving here as a terminated employee. You'll be leaving in handcuffs for filing a false police report." Brenda looked at the officers. Sergeant Miller crossed his arms. He wasn't smiling. Filing a false report about a weapon in an airport was a federal felony. She was looking at jail time if the CEO decided to press the issue. With shaking hands, Brenda unclipped the lanyard. She pulled the badge over her head, disturbing her tight bun, strands of hair falling loose around her face, making her look unraveled and manic. She dropped the badge into Richard's hand. "Pack your things," Richard said quietly. "You are banned from Sterling Airways property. You will not fly with us. You will not work for us. And I will personally ensure that the note in your employment file details exactly why you were let go, so no other airline makes the mistake of hiring you." Brenda grabbed her purse from under the counter. She looked at the crowd. 200 people were watching. Some were shaking their heads. Others were posting the video to TikTok and Twitter. She was already viral. Her life as she knew it was over. She tried to muster one last scrap of dignity. She lifted her chin, glared at Elias, and spat. "I hope you're happy. You ruined a working woman's life today." Elias looked at her. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked almost pitying. "I didn't ruin your life, Ma'am," Elias said softly. "You did. I just wanted to go home." Brenda let out a sob and pushed through the crowd, vanishing into the busy terminal concourse, a ghost of the authority she once held. Richard watched her go, then turned his attention back to the podium. He clipped his own CEO badge onto his leather jacket. "Todd," Richard said. "Yes, sir." Todd jumped. "You're working this flight alone now. Can you handle it?" "Yes, sir, absolutely, sir." "Good. Start boarding. But first..." Richard turned to the computer. He tapped a few keys. The printer whirred to life. He pulled out a fresh boarding pass. He handed it to Elias. "Dr. Freeman," Richard said. "I know you were in seat 1A, but I've just opened up the owner's suite on this aircraft. It's a private cabin usually reserved for, well, me. It has a shower, a double bed, and soundproofing. It's yours." Elias took the ticket. He looked at Richard. "That isn't necessary. Mr. Sterling, 1A is fine." "Please," Richard insisted, "consider it a consultation fee. I might need some medical advice on my lower back during the flight." Elias smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. "In that case, I accept." "And," Richard added, raising his voice so the rest of the passengers could hear, "because you all had to witness this unfortunate display, and because boarding is delayed by 15 minutes, free drinks for the entire economy cabin, on me." A cheer went up from the waiting area. The tension broke. The atmosphere shifted from hostility to celebration. Richard looked at Elias. "After you, Doctor." Elias walked toward the jet bridge, but as he passed the scanner, he stopped. He turned back to Richard. "Mr. Sterling," Elias said. "There is one thing." "Anything," Richard said. "That gate agent. Brenda," Elias said. "She was terrified of losing her pension. She was hateful, yes, but she was also frightened. People don't become that hard unless they're afraid of something." Richard raised an eyebrow. "You're feeling sorry for her." "No," Elias said. "I'm a neurosurgeon. I look for the root cause of the symptom. She's the symptom. The culture that made her think she had to act like a pit bull to protect the company. That's the disease." Richard went silent. He looked at the empty spot where Brenda had stood. He looked at the long line of tired passengers. He realized that for years he had pushed for efficiency and security above all else. Had he created the environment where a Brenda could thrive? "You're right," Richard said, his voice somber. "She's gone, but my work is just starting." Elias nodded and walked down the jet bridge. Richard stood there for a moment. He was about to follow when his phone buzzed. He pulled it out. It was a text from his VP of Public Relations. "Turn on the news. Now. The video is everywhere. #Sterling Airways is trending #1. But it's not just the video of Brenda screaming." Richard frowned. "What else is there?" he muttered. He opened the link. It wasn't just the video of the confrontation. Someone had dug up Brenda's past, and someone else, an anonymous user, had just posted a thread exposing a massive kickback scheme involving gate agents selling upgrade seats for cash under the table. And Brenda's name was at the top of the list. Richard's eyes went cold. This wasn't just prejudice. This was a crime ring. He looked at Todd, who was scanning tickets with shaking hands. "Todd," Richard said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Stop boarding." Todd froze. "So close the door," Richard said. "Nobody else gets on this plane until I make a phone call." The drama wasn't over. It was just shifting gears. Brenda was the tip of the iceberg, and Richard Sterling was about to crash the whole ship to find the rot. The jet bridge was quiet, save for the nervous shuffling of the remaining passengers who were confused by the sudden halt in boarding. Inside the terminal, Richard Sterling stood next to the podium, his phone glowing with the damning report his security team had just emailed him. He looked at Todd, the young gate agent who was now sweating profusely, despite the freezing draft coming from the open cabin door. "Todd," Richard said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I'm going to ask you one question. If you lie to me, you go down with Brenda. If you tell me the truth, you keep your job and get immunity. Do you understand?" Todd nodded frantically, his eyes wide. "Yes, sir, I understand." Why did Brenda really deny Dr. Freeman? Richard asked. It wasn't just racism. "I know Brenda. She's prejudiced. Yes. But she's also greedy. She was protecting that seat." "Why?" Todd swallowed hard, looking around to make sure no other employees were listening. He leaned in close. She sold it," Todd whispered. Richard's eyes narrowed. "She sold seat 1A. It was already sold. To Dr. Freeman." "I know," Todd rushed to explain. "But there's a guy, a businessman, who flies to London every month. He pays cash, under the table. $2,000 for a guaranteed first-class upgrade. Brenda takes the cash, cancels a legitimate ticket, usually a tourist or someone she thinks won't fight back, marks it as a security risk or late arrival, and then slides her guy into the seat as a comp upgrade." Richard felt a vein throb in his temple. It was a perfect, parasitic scam. She was cannibalizing his paying customers to pocket cash bribes. "Who is the passenger?" Richard demanded. "The one she sold the seat to." Todd pointed to the screen. A name was highlighted in the standby list: Arthur P. Vance. "He's in the lounge right now," Todd said, waiting for her text to come down. "Cancel his ticket," Richard ordered. "Ban him from the airline. And, Todd." "Yes, sir. Give me the names of everyone else involved, who covers for her, who signs off on the overrides." Todd hesitated, then sighed. "The dam broke. It's not just her. It's the station manager. Gavin. He takes a cut. That's why Brenda never gets in trouble for the complaints. Gavin shreds them." Richard looked out the window at the snow swirling around the Boeing 777. This was supposed to be a spot check. It had turned into a corporate exorcism. "Thank you. Todd," Richard said, "finish boarding the plane. Do not let Mr. Vance on board. I have a phone call to make." Richard walked down the jet bridge. Stepping onto the plane, he turned left, not right. He walked past the galley where the flight attendants were whispering nervously, having heard the rumors. He entered the owner's suite. Dr. Elias Freeman was sitting in a plush leather armchair, a glass of sparkling water in his hand. The suite was quiet, isolated from the chaos of the main cabin. "Everything all right?" Elias asked, seeing the dark look on Richard's face. "Better than all right," Richard said, sitting on the ottoman across from him. "We just cut out a tumor I didn't even know we had." Richard picked up the satellite phone on the cabin wall. He dialed his chief of security in New York. "It's Sterling," Richard said into the phone. "Initiate Protocol 0 at JFK Terminal 4. Secure the station manager's office, seize the servers, and send a team to Brenda Miller's home address. I want a full audit of her assets. If she bought a car, a house, or even a coffee maker with money stolen from my company. I want it frozen. Tonight." He hung up. The plane pushed back from the gate. as the engines roared to life. Richard looked at Elias. "I promised you justice," Richard said. "You're about to see what that looks like on a corporate scale." While Dr. Freeman and Richard Sterling soared to 35,000 feet in the comfort of a private suite, Brenda Miller was on the ground, and her world was rapidly disintegrating. She was sitting in her car in the employee parking lot, the heater blasting against the cold. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard her knuckles were white. She had been crying for 20 minutes, but now the panic was turning into a plan. "I can fix this," she thought. "I just need to talk to Gavin. Gavin will smooth it over. He knows I have dirt on him. He has to help me." She fumbled for her phone and dialed the station manager. It went straight to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. "Pick up, you coward!" she screamed at the dashboard. Suddenly, a text message popped up on her screen. It wasn't from Gavin. It was from her bank. Alert. "Your checking account ending in -889. Zero has been frozen due to suspicious activity pending legal review. Please contact customer service." Brenda stared at the screen. Frozen. That account held her savings. It held the bribe money she had been stashing for 3 years. Another notification. This one from her credit card company. Card declined / suspended. A knock on her car window made her jump. She looked up. Through the frosted glass, she saw the blue uniform of the Port Authority police. But these weren't the beat cops from the terminal. These were detectives. And standing behind them were 2 men in dark suits, holding briefcases. Sterling Airways corporate security. Brenda rolled down the window just an inch. "What do you want? I was fired. I'm leaving." "Brenda Miller," the detective asked. "Please step out of the vehicle." "Why?" Brenda shrieked. "I haven't done anything illegal. Being rude isn't a crime." "No," the man in the suit spoke up. He stepped forward, opening a folder. "But wire fraud is. Grand larceny is. And violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is." He held up a piece of paper. It was a printout of a chat log. A chat log between Brenda and Gavin, discussing the first-class fee split. "Todd gave us the password to your work terminal," the suit said calmly. "We have the spreadsheets. Brenda, we know about the upgrades. We know about the fake refunds. We estimate you've stolen approximately $200,000 from Sterling Airways over the last 4 years." Brenda felt the blood leave her head. The world tilted. "Step out of the car. Ms. Miller," the detective repeated, opening the door. Brenda stepped out into the slush. The cold air bit through her thin uniform coat, the uniform she was no longer allowed to wear. "Place your hands behind your back," the detective said. The click of the handcuffs was loud in the empty parking lot. "You can't do this," Brenda sobbed as they walked her toward the squad car. "I was just following orders. Gavin made me do it." "We picked up Gavin 10 minutes ago," the detective said dryly. "He's already cutting a deal. He says it was all your idea." Brenda stopped walking. The betrayal hit her harder than the handcuffs. The system she had served, the hierarchy she had worshipped, it was eating her alive. As they shoved her into the back of the police cruiser, she looked up at the sky. A massive Sterling Airways jet was climbing into the night, its red and gold lights blinking against the darkness. She knew, with a sickening certainty, the doctor, Elias Freeman and Richard Sterling were on that plane. They were drinking champagne. They were warm. They were free. And she was going to central booking, high above the Atlantic. The atmosphere in the owner's suite was somber but peaceful. Dinner had been cleared away. Richard Sterling was looking at his tablet. "It's done," Richard said quietly. They arrested her in the parking lot, and the station manager. The police are seizing the assets to pay back the customers she defrauded. Elias looked out the window at the stars. That is swift. It had to be, Richard said. He put the tablet down. Doctor. Freeman. I have to ask. When she stopped you, when she tried to humiliate you, how did you stay so calm? I would have screamed. I would have thrown something. Elias turned to face the billionaire. His expression was weary, but strong. Mr. Sterling, Elias said, I'm a black man in America. If I scream, I'm the threat. If I throw something, I'm the criminal. My anger is a luxury I cannot afford. Silence is the only weapon that doesn't get used against me. Richard stared at him. For all his money, for all his power, for all his mystery shopping, he realized he had never truly understood the weight of that reality until he saw it play out at Gate B12. You shouldn't have to live like that, Richard said. Not on my airline. Not anywhere. I know, Elias said. But tonight, the system actually worked. That's a start. Richard nodded. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a heavy, cream-colored envelope. I want to offer you something, Richard said. I'm not trying to buy your silence. You can tell this story to anyone you want. In fact, I hope you do. But I want to offer you a position. A position, Elias asked, amused. I already have a job. Richard, I'm quite busy. Not a job, Richard corrected. A seat on the board of directors for Sterling Airways. Elias sat up straighter. Excuse me. I need eyes like yours, Richard said seriously. I need someone who sees the cracks in the system. Someone who understands people, not just profit margins. I want you to head a new committee on passenger dignity and ethics. You'll have full authority to audit any station. Any time. Elias looked at the envelope. It was an offer of immense power, a chance to change the very culture that had tried to reject him. You're serious, Elias stated. Dead serious, Richard said. Will you help me fix this? Elias took a sip of his water. He thought about Brenda. He thought about the millions of people who travel, feeling small and helpless in the face of authority. He took the envelope. I have some conditions, Elias said. Name them, Richard replied. First, Elias smiled. We rewrite the dress code policy. Hoodies should be allowed in first class. Richard laughed, a loud, booming sound. Done. And second, Elias said, his eyes twinkling. Next time you go undercover, lose the Red Sox hat. It's a dead giveaway. The two men laughed as the plane cut through the night, leaving the turmoil of New York behind them, flying toward a new horizon. 6 months had passed since the incident at Gate B12. The winter snow had melted into a humid New York summer. But for Brenda Miller, the world remained cold and confining. The New York Southern District Court was packed. It wasn't just a trial for fraud. It had become a referendum on corporate corruption. The video of Brenda screaming at Dr. Freeman and the undercover CEO had been viewed 40 million times, but the public outrage was nothing compared to the legal avalanche that followed. Brenda sat at the defense table, wearing a cheap grey suit she had bought at a thrift store. Her assets, the BMW, the condo in Queens. The savings accounts had all been seized by the court to pay restitution to the hundreds of passengers she had scammed over the years. She looked smaller, older. Her hair was greying at the roots, no longer dyed the severe black she used to wear. She was trembling, her lawyer, A public defender who looked overworked and exhausted leaned over. "Brenda," he whispered. "The judge is ready. Remember what I said. Show remorse. Do not argue." Brenda nodded, biting her lip. She looked back at the gallery. It was full of victims. People who had missed weddings, funerals, and business deals because Brenda had sold their seats for cash. And in the front row, sitting quietly, were two men, Richard Sterling and Dr. Elias Freeman. Richard wore a navy suit, looking every bit the billionaire CEO. Elias wore a casual blazer and a t-shirt, looking relaxed and dignified. They weren't there to gloat. They were there to witness the end of the chapter. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The Honourable Judge Theodore Vance, no relation to the man who tried to buy the seat, swept into the room. He was a stern man, known for harsh sentencing on white-collar crime. He sat down and adjusted his glasses, looking down at Brenda with a gaze that could peel paint. "Ms. Miller," Judge Vance began, his voice booming without a microphone. "You have pleaded guilty to 3 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of filing a false police report, and 1 count of grand larceny. Do you have anything to say before I pass sentence?" Brenda stood up. Her legs felt like jelly. She looked at the judge, then her eyes darted to Elias in the front row. Brenda's voice wavered. "I just want to say, I was under a lot of pressure. The airline, they demand perfection. I made mistakes, but I'm not a bad person. I wanted to get ahead." It was the wrong thing to say. Judge Vance's expression hardened. "You wanted to get ahead, Ms. Miller. You didn't steal bread to feed a starving family. You stole seats from legitimate customers to line your pockets with tax-free cash. And when you were caught, you weaponized the police against an innocent man because of the color of his skin. That is not a mistake. That is malice." The judge opened the file in front of him. "The prosecution has asked for 3 years," Judge Vance said. "However, given the breach of public trust and the sheer volume of your victims, over 400 documented cases, I find that insufficient." Brenda's lawyer stiffened. Brenda gasped. "Brenda Miller," the judge declared, "I sentence you to 7 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are also ordered to pay $250,000 in restitution. Since your current assets only cover half of that, your wages will be garnished for the remainder of your working life. Once you are released—" Bang! The gavel struck the wood. 7 years. Brenda shrieked, her composure shattering. "You can't. That's my whole life. You took moments from people's lives that they can never get back." The judge said simply, "Consider this a refund." The bailiffs moved in. They didn't treat her with the deference she used to demand at the gate. They grabbed her arms as she was being led away, handcuffed. She locked eyes with Elias one last time. She expected to see triumph on his face. She wanted him to sneer, so she could hate him. But Elias didn't sneer. He looked at her with a profound, heavy sadness. He gave her a small nod, not of forgiveness, but of acknowledgement. Brenda looked away, shame finally flooding her veins. The doors closed behind her, sealing her fate. 1 hour later. Richard and Elias stood on the steps of the courthouse, squinting in the bright afternoon sun. The media was clamoring at the bottom of the stairs, cameras flashing, but security held them back. 7 years, Richard murmured. "I didn't think he'd go that hard." "She broke the social contract," Elias said, adjusting his sunglasses. "When you hold power over people, Whether you're a surgeon, a CEO, or a gate agent, you have a duty. She forgot that. Well, Richard said, checking his watch. She has time to remember it now. A black SUV pulled up to the curb. Richard opened the door, but he didn't get in immediately. He turned to Elias. Are you ready for the board meeting next week? Elias. We're voting on the new Passenger Bill of Rights you drafted. Elias smiled. I'm ready. I think you'll find my proposal on overbooking penalties quite expensive for the airline. Richard laughed. Good. If it hurts my wallet, it means we're doing it right. It forces us to be better. Richard extended his hand. Thank you, Elias, for everything. You didn't just save a flight that night. You saved the company. Elias shook his hand firmly. I just wanted to get to London. Richard, but I'm glad I missed that flight. Richard got into the car. See you in the boardroom. Director Freeman. The SUV pulled away. Elias stood alone on the sidewalk for a moment. He took a deep breath of the city air. His phone buzzed. It was a text from his daughter. Dad, I saw the news. Justice served, Elias typed back. Justice served. Now, I'm coming home. He hailed a taxi. As he sat in the back seat, watching the city blur by, he thought about the gate agent, the badge, and the power of standing your ground. He closed his eyes. Finally at peace, the turbulence was over. The landing was smooth, and for the first time in a long time, the sky looked clear. And that is the story of how arrogance met its match. Brenda thought her badge gave her the right to judge others, but she forgot that true power isn't about controlling people, it's about serving them. In the end, karma didn't just hit her, it completely dismantled her life. While Dr. Freeman rose to change the very system that tried to keep him down. What would you have done if you were in Dr. Freeman's shoes? Would you have kept your cool, or would you have lost it? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please do me a huge favor. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes the good guys actually win. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.